Welcome to the J Sizzle Football Podcast. Today is going to be my third football episode. I haven't done football episodes in a while. Obviously, with the NBA playoffs that just finished, I was really just focusing on the NBA. But now that the NBA playoffs is over, and the Milwaukee Bucks, again, congratulations to them. They're NBA champions. Now I'm going to be moving on to football. Football season's coming up very shortly, as you know. I think the first preseason game is in 2 weeks. We'll get the season the beginning of September. So a lot of excitement right now, coming with the new NFL season. A lot of good things to look forward to. A lot of excitement. It's going to be a good season. I know there's a lot of things that people are looking for with certain teams. I'm going to cover every single team. I already covered the Chicago Bears. I did one on the draft. Today I'm going to cover another team in the NFC North, the Minnesota Vikings. So you guys will get to hear about the Vikings. But no, my goal is obviously to cover every team before the season starts. I'll be covering teams even through the preseason, so I won't really give a recap on the preseason games. But once the regular season comes, I'll finish all the teams, and then we'll get into individual regular season games by the week. I'll do 2 or 3 podcasts just on football a week. We'll talk about the upcoming games. We'll talk about the results. Talk about trades, new signings, coaching departures and things like that, right? So we'll go over a lot of different things, Super Bowl predictions and things like that. So it's going to be exciting to talk about football. I know, a lot of you guys are waiting for the football podcast to come, and they're here now. So can't wait to get them started with you guys. So without further ado, let me start with the my number 2 episode on the teams, my number 3 episode for football overall. I'm going to do the Minnesota Vikings. So last season for the Minnesota Vikings, as you guys know, the Vikings finished 7-9 last year. It was kind of a tough year for this team. The tough part was the defensive end of the field, right? Obviously, offensively, they were one of the top offensive teams. They ranked 4th in offense last year total. They ran the ball very well with Dalvin Cook, of course. Threw the ball well with Kirk Cousins and his weapons, Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen and Kyle Rudolph. They have a very good offensive line, so that helps too. And, it was just an offense last year that just, was flowing very well and was hitting in a lot of different spots. And they were able to, move the ball and score the ball in many different areas of the game. And it's an offense that's going to be very good again this year. Obviously, we know they lost Kyle Rudolph. He's going to be a big loss. That's going to hurt a lot. Obviously Kyle Rudolph is a guy who's not catching a ton of passes anymore. He wasn't even top 5 and 4 in this receiving team, or wasn't even top 4 last year for this team in terms of receiving yards. But he's such a good pass blocker and run blocker that he really helps his team out, and he gives a lot of guys so much space to really move with the ball, and he gives Kirk Cousins even more time to get the ball downfield. So definitely going to miss that out of Kyle Rudolph. So stepping up in replacement for Kyle Rudolph at the tight end spot will be Irv Smith, who last year, he'll be going into his 4th year, who last year he had 365 yards on 5 touchdowns. So he had a pretty solid year for a guy who's still relatively young and who was kind of not really looked at as the face of the tight end spot for the Vikings. It was still Kyle Rudolph last year. He came in and he kind of had a pretty solid year. I know he struggled a little bit with drops. He drops the ball a little much, but got good speed for a tight end, decent route runner. But if he can get those hands up, he could surely be a nice number 1 option for this team for sure at the tight end spot, because they're going to look for some production there because it's a spot that they generally over the years have relied on. So definitely a big shoes to fill for Irv Smith for sure. Going to the receiver spot, Justin Jefferson last year had 1,400 yards, 88 catches, 7 touchdowns, played incredible last year. Right, just absolutely incredible for a rookie. Broke all sorts of records for the Vikings and all sorts of rookie records in general. So just an incredible rookie year for Justin Jefferson, and I expect him to play even better this year. I know there's going to be more pressure on him. I know defenses are going to be able to prepare more for him. But I still think he'll play better. I've seen videos. He's working really hard this offseason to, fix the holes he had last year. He didn't have too many holes in his game last year, but he's working hard to fix those and to get even better. So definitely something to look forward to there. Should be a big year for Justin Jefferson. Maybe 1,600 yards this year, and I would assume over 100 catches for Justin Jefferson this season. For Adam Thielen, had under 1,000 last year, but had 74 catches with that. And the most surprising stat for Adam Thielen last year, was the 14 touchdowns. Just an absolute threat in the red zone. an absolute threat to cross the goal line. Adam Thielen is a guy that, is still very solid. He's still in his prime. He can still perform at a very high level, as you know. As you know, he had the 14 touchdowns, as I mentioned last year. And it's going to be interesting to really keep an eye on and see what Adam Thielen does this year, because Minnesota is a team that doesn't really have a reliable number 3 option, right? So it puts a lot of pressure on Adam Thielen, and it puts a lot of pressure on Justin Jefferson. So going to be interesting to see what those two guys do this year. But again, I expect both guys to go over 1,000 yards and have great years again for this team. So going to be a big key for Minnesota, because they play so much through the receiver position. They rely very heavily on the receivers, and they also rely very heavily on another guy playing the running back spot named Dalvin Cook. Right? Let's talk about him for a minute. Dalvin Cook last year, 1,500 yards, had 360 yards in the air, so had about 1,000. If you add all the yards up, he had a little over 1,500. So he had around 1,900 yards from scrimmage last year, added along with 17 total touchdowns. Absolutely ridiculous. Had 16 touchdowns on the ground, only 1 touchdown in the air, but that's fine. You can live with that when you're having 16 touchdowns on the ground and running for 1,500, averaging 5 on a carry, which is absolutely ridiculous too. So Dalvin Cook, just last year, of course, when you watched him, he seemed to get better and better every game. He never really slowed down. He never had any bad games when you think about it. If you go back and watch the games and look at the numbers, right? He performed very solid all the way through the season, from start to finish. Just carries the ball with a lot of force, a lot of aggression, has a lot of speed, good juke moves, nice spin move. Just a very good and smart, high IQ runner who knows where to go. When the holes open up, he goes to the holes. And he's, he gets good help, of course, from his offensive line, which helps as well. So, no, Dalvin Cook is in for another big season, in my opinion. 1,500 yards might be, to do that again with 16 touchdowns might be a stretch, but I think it'll definitely be at least 1,300 with double-digit touchdowns on the ground for sure, which will obviously be a big thing for this team, because they're going to rely very heavily on him, as well as the passing game, as I mentioned. Now for the offensive line. They drafted Wyatt Davis in the draft this year. He comes out of Ohio State. He should be a solid pickup, right? He's going to play that guard spot. So he should be pretty solid. He should really help this team out on the offensive line, which is, obviously, as I mentioned, is a strength of this team, their offensive line. So he should help them out even more. Of course, you're getting Garrett Bradbury back, who kind of didn't have the type of year last year that you would have expected him to have. But hopefully this year you see a jump in his game. He's obviously the center for this team, if you guys didn't know. So hopefully we see a jump in his game, because they're going to rely on him very heavy, because he was a high draft pick a couple years ago, and he's got a lot of potential, and they got a lot of things going for him in Minnesota. They're really looking at him and saying, okay, you can be the next top 5, top 10 center in the league, but we need you to perform to what your potential is. So big year for him, in my opinion. This year is a make or break year for him. So I'm going to keep an eye on that as well. You, of course, still have Brian O'Neill. He's, I think, to most people, regarded as the team's best tackle. He's a solid tackle. He blocks very well. He's got good footwork, good size at that spot too, as well. Not like super big, but good enough size to be agile and athletic at the tackle spot. So definitely Brian O'Neill is a guy who's still very young. He's going into his 5th year. A guy who Minnesota is going to rely on very heavily again, along with Garrett Bradbury and Wyatt Davis. Sorry, my fault there on that one. I was just trying to remember the name, but Wyatt Davis too. So they're going to rely on those 3 very heavily this year. Now on to the one thing that really hurt this team last year, right? It was their defense. There's no question that their defense hurt this team last year, and it really kind of stemmed from the injuries defensively that this team had, right? They had a lot of injuries last year defensively, and that kind of really hurt this team on the defensive side of the ball, because this is a defense the last couple of years that has been known to be top 5, top 10 in the league, and has known to really carry this team into the playoffs and carry this team into NFC Championship games, which they made a couple years, 4 or 5 years ago, I think, and just do different things. This is a defense that, they have a good defensive coordinator. It's a very well-run defense, and last year this team was very, very hurt with injuries on the defensive side of the ball, as I mentioned. Danielle Hunter, he missed the entire season last year. That's a huge loss. Eric Kendricks, great linebacker, right? Very good tackler. Missed the entire season. Anthony Barr, who's a good tackler, a good tight end cover guy, he missed the majority of the year. And Michael Pierce, he didn't play last year because of coronavirus. So, you're getting all these guys back. You're getting Pierce back. You get Eric Kendricks back. You get Anthony Barr back, right? You get Danielle Hunter back. So it should really be it should really be a solid year for the Vikings defense as it was 2 years ago. Again, because last year it would have been a solid defense. And in my opinion, last year, they probably would have, instead of 9-7, they probably would have finished 10-6, closer maybe even to 11-5, if this defense was fully healthy all year. But of course it wasn't. But coming back this year, there's a lot of expectations for this defense, and of course this team in general. But this defense, needs to come in here and step up and play at a high level. Of course, as you guys know, they added Patrick Peterson. That was talked about a lot. A lot of people think Patrick Peterson has kind of fallen off a little bit. A lot of people think he's still got enough left in the tank to give Minnesota a couple good years. So we'll see. I mean, I still think Patrick Peterson has stuff left in the tank for this team, and I think he could give this Vikings team some good remaining years for sure, without a question. He's going into his 10th season. He didn't have a great year last year with Arizona, but it also didn't seem like he wanted to really be in Arizona, so that also factors into players not playing well. Sometimes when they want to leave teams, they don't really play too well because they just want to get out of there. So now Patrick Peterson's in a place where he seems like he really wants to be in Minneapolis, and he's in a good organization, a better organization than the Cardinals, right? A better defense than the Cardinals. He's going to have more help around him at the safety spots and things like that, right? No disrespect to Budda Baker. He's great, but I would take Harrison Smith over Budda Baker. And then at the other safety spot, you lost Anthony Harris, which is a big loss, but then you went out and you got, name needs to come to mind here, Xavier Woods. Xavier Woods is a solid safety. He's been pretty solid his whole career. He's moved around to a couple different teams, but he's been pretty solid his entire career and always just been a guy who can do enough to help out at that safety spot. And next to Harrison Smith, his game should shine even more than it ever has in his career. So good safety tandem in Minnesota for sure. Now comes to the linebackers, right? The linebackers. They have one of the better linebacker units in the league. You obviously bring back Anthony Barr, as I mentioned, Eric Hendricks, as I mentioned. So those are two linebackers who are two of the top linebackers in the league, and they're really going to help this linebacker core, because this is a team that really struggled to stop the run last year, as well as the pass, but the run was even worse. And, when you put these two guys in here who are good coverage guys, but mainly they're there to stop the run, they're two great run stoppers, so it will really help Minnesota's ability to stop the run, right? Because that was something that I mentioned that they really struggled with last year. You also have Nick Vigil. He was a free agent signing, a pretty good signing in my opinion. He'll help as well, pretty good run stopper. So you definitely have a good amount of run stoppers for this Minnesota team. Now all coming back, the addition of Vigil and the return of Anthony Barr and Eric Hendricks will help a lot in stopping the run. Because, last year stopping the run was atrocious for this team. They gave up 134 yards a game on the ground, which ranked them 27 out of the 32 teams in the league. So obviously you need to see an improvement there, right? You don't want to be 27th out of 32 teams in the league. So with those linebackers coming back and the addition of Vigil, it's really going to help, and it will put them, in my opinion, top 10 in run defense. And then the pass defense last year was 25, right? They gave up 258 passing yards a game. They had Patrick Peterson, who I think will play well. Harrison Smith, I think he might have missed 2 or 3 games last year. Yeah, he did miss a couple games. He'll come back, hopefully be fully healthy. That will really help. You added Mackenzie Alexander. He should play in the slot at the cornerback spot. He's solid, right? So you added enough guys. And you added, like I mentioned, of course, Xavier Woods, who might or might not be an update from Anthony Harris. That's going to be a tough one to call. But pass defense should be better. I think it'll be more around 16, 17 this year with their run defense, like I said, being top 10, maybe even top 5. Which I think it will put their total defense. Last year, their total defense was 27th in the league. I think they'll be around 11 or 12 in the league this year, which will really help. And their offense was 4 last year. I think this year they'll be around 9. So obviously, you see maybe a little bit of a decrease in the offense, but that's fine. You're still top 10. You're still right there. And you see a big increase in the defense, in my opinion. So definitely a team to look out for this year. Minnesota, man, they're going to be scary. They're in a division with Green Bay where we don't know. As I mentioned in the Bears podcast, we don't know what's going on with Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. Detroit is not going to win this division, right? Detroit, if they ever have a chance to win this division, they're light years away. Or not light years away, sorry. They're many years away from having a chance to win this division, probably 7-8 years in my opinion. They got a long, long way to go. I don't know about their quarterback situation right now. They don't have many great receivers. Their defense is kind of shaky, so coaching's not great. So they're many light years away from even having a chance there in Detroit. So really, this division is going to come down to the Vikings, the Bears, and the Packers, right? And we know what the Vikings, we know what the Bears offer. If you didn't hear what the Bears offer, go watch that Bears podcast. It came out like a month and a half, 2 months ago. the Bears are going to be a good team. You bring in Justin Fields. Let's see how many games Justin Fields plays this season. If he plays a lot of games, I think the Bears, and he develops well, the Bears can get to the playoffs, as I mentioned. Aaron Rodgers, what's going to happen there, right? Now you have Devontae Adams wanting out, and Devontae Adams, not really agreeing with what the Packers want to pay him. Same with Aaron Rodgers, right? Aaron Rodgers turned down the biggest contract in NFL history, so that means he obviously wants out ASAP. So those two guys most likely might be out this year. If those two guys are playing healthy this year with Green Bay, or not healthy, if those two guys are on Green Bay's roster this year and they play and they don't sit out, obviously Green Bay would most likely be the favorite. But if those two guys are out, then you go to Green Bay and you have a whole new situation with a whole new quarterback for the first time in so many years. And, and you lose Devontae Adams too. You don't really have any receivers or anybody to throw the ball to. So Green Bay would have a really tough year. They would really struggle, and that means it would come down to Minnesota and Chicago. And, in my previous podcast with the Bears, I said Chicago, I think, would outdo Minnesota in this division. I'm going to stick by that. I think Chicago will still outdo Minnesota, even with Minnesota, getting better defensively with the injuries and the COVID, players returning. I'm still going to take Chicago. I like what this Minnesota team offers. I think they'll finish around 10-7. But I think this Chicago team will finish around 11-6. So I think they'll be a game better. But, it's going to be interesting. And a lot of people, I think, will comment and say, okay, that's too high of a record for the Bears, 11-6. But I don't think it is. Go watch the Bears podcast. I talked about everything that they have. They have a great defense. And now you bring in a good quarterback who can hopefully develop, and I think he will. And that's all they really needed the last 3 or 4 years. So that's it from the Bears standpoint. Now from the Vikings standpoint, to finish 10-7, as I mentioned, that's still a very solid record. I think with that record, they'll get into the playoffs. And when I say competing, the Bears and the Vikings, I mean competing for the number one spot. Right? I don't mean the Vikings won't make the playoffs. I just mean that one of them will be competing for the division winner. Right? I think the Vikings will make the playoffs, and I think the Bears will make the playoffs as well. I just think the Bears will finish with a better record and have a better seed going into the playoffs. But I still think the Vikings will make the playoffs. It's a team that, like I mentioned, is pretty good on both sides of the ball now with the returning of a lot of their defensive players from injury and COVID. And it should be an exciting year for the Minnesota Vikings. So let me go over their schedule really quick for you guys, and I'll give you guys I obviously said 10-7, right? But I'm going to give you guys a game-by-game breakdown of what I think will happen with this team. So game number 1, opening game, you go into Cincinnati. I think the Cincinnati game they lose. I think they start 0-1. They go into Arizona week 2. I think they'll win 1-1. Week 3 they have Seattle at home. I think they'll win. Right, so that's 2-1. Cleveland, make them 3-1 with Cleveland, right? Detroit week 5, make them 4-1. In Carolina, make them 5-1. Dallas at home, I'll bring them to 6-1. Baltimore on the road, 6-2. Then you have the Chargers on the road, 6-3. You have Green Bay at home, 7-3. You have San Francisco on the road, 7-4. Detroit on the road, I bet they lose that one, 7-5. You have Pittsburgh at home, 8-5, they'll win. Chicago on the road, 8-6. The Rams at home, 9-6. You have Green Bay on the road, 9-7. And then you have Chicago at home for the last game. I think they'll win that one, so they'll finish 10-7 on the season. So they have a pretty tough schedule. They go through a lot of different teams, and a lot of their tough games are on the road, like the Chargers and the Ravens and the 49ers and the Bears. That's a division game. And Green Bay, another division game. Cincinnati's a pretty tough game on the road, too. So you have some tough games on the road for this team, but overall, I think they'll finish 10-7. They're a good home team. They have pretty respectable home schedule, in my opinion. So I don't know. I think 10-7, realistically, for this team. Playoff berth, as I mentioned. I would have to go over my predictions more for every team and kind of make a bracket to tell you guys how far I think they would go. But if I could base it off of assumptions, I think they would probably get to the second round and probably lose. But I have to see, again, how far this team or what the bracket would look like and who they would necessarily play. Because obviously, again, I have to go off my predictions and have to, predict every team's record to see where they would end up being seed-wise in the playoffs. But, that's going to wrap it up for the Vikings podcast. For those of you, that are tuning into these football podcasts, make sure you guys keep up with the Instagram as well. I'm going to start doing more polls. I did the wide receiver tournament. A running back tournament's coming later today. And I also have a tight end tournament coming after. We're going to do position by position tournament, then team by team. I'm going to let you guys predict the record of what you think each team will have. So, for instance, I'll do the Vikings schedule. Maybe I'll probably roll it out tomorrow for you guys. and I'll put every game in a voting poll that they play all year, and you guys will just vote on who you think will win that specific game. I'll put the home team on the right side and the away team on the left side, and I'll also put the stadium it's at too, like the venue, so you guys can get a better idea if you get mixed up with the home and away. And then you guys can pick, okay, week 1, Minnesota will win in Cincinnati. Week 2, Arizona will win against Minnesota, right? So you can go ahead and pick those games, and it will give me, a perspective on what you guys think about the Vikings record at the end of the day. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast again, and have a good one.